And we are live. Welcome back, everyone, to AJC and the Web Devs. We got returning guest Christopher Burns coming at us from the island of Greece. Is Greece an island? I forget.
Well, Greece is many islands, but Athens is on the mainland.
Okay.
I
So you're in
think.
Athens.
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, the capital.
Awesome. Yeah, you've been
Yeah,
traveling all over
lovely.
Europe, right?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say all over. I came into a period of time where my accommodation, the rental place that I rent, is unsafe to live in, so you can't live there. So they're like, you need to find somewhere else to live. So I was like, what do I do? And I was like, you know what? I'll just go to a different country. So I went to Malta and then went to Sicily. And now I'm in Greece. You could say it's got pros and cons. I'm not sure it's quite the life for me because I do like my, I don't know, having a base of somewhere to come back to. But it has been very fun.
So you're not a big digital nomad. Just wanted to kind of try it out.
I don't know. I feel like if I prepared for it better, I could have been, but I literally decided to go down to London and then was like, you know what? I'm just going to take everything that I've got in my suitcase and go. So I just went from London with the random stuff that I packed without preparing for like international travel at all. And it's like I got to the airport. They're like, do you know you've got like scissors, 250-liter stuff all in your bag? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about all
You
of
can't
that.
fly with scissors in the UK.
Well, it's like an international thing. You can. They just have to be under a certain thing. It's like knives. You could stab someone. If you check it in, it's fine. It's if you pull it
keep
into
it in your
like
bag.
yeah, the overhead. So it's been a I don't know, enjoyable time. Learn a little bit of Italian. Not learn any Greek, but yeah,
Greek's a little harder.
a bit squiggly for me. So
That's cool, man. I used to dream about doing that. That was kind of what my plan was for a while when I was first learning to code. I was like, I'm gonna get a job and I'm gonna travel the world. And then I got a job, and then 1 month later, I got a girlfriend who turned into a wife, and all that went out the window.
yeah, I think it's one of these things where um, I think I'm in the point in my life where I'm very sure of what I'm doing with work and the startup I'm working on, but I'm also so lost with like personal life of like you can go anywhere, you can live anywhere. So where do you want to go? And it's like you don't know. So you're trying to pick somewhere better but not extreme and try it out. And for me, that's London. So I'll be moving to London hopefully next month.
And you've never lived in London before. I'm sure you've been there plenty of times,
No,
right?
yeah, I've been there hundreds of times. But it's one of them things where there's quite a lot of tech communities around London, and it's okay living up the country, but at the end of the day, London is like its own country compared to the rest of the UK. And sure, it costs a lot more, but there's just so much more technology, startups, community there than anywhere else in the UK.
Yeah, totally. It's like, New York or San Francisco in that respect.
Yeah, and then St. Louis in the middle, where there's some random things, not much.
Just hurricanes, as you say. It was actually a tornado, not a hurricane. Okay.
Look, the amount of random facts that I just hear sometimes from St. Louis is like, I never heard this place before, and then obviously I met you and everything, and then there's just like loads of random things that seem to have happened in the square kilometer,
Well, what's funny is
the area around there.
this is the first time I've lived in St. Louis now for a little over 3 years. I think this is the first time I got contacted from my dad, who was like, "Hey, I heard something happened in St. Louis." It's the first time anything has been a big enough deal that like made it to the news in California. What's up,
Wow.
Fuzzy? He said, "Oh snap, it's Burn Chris." Fuzzy, I was supposed to pair with you this weekend. Sorry, I didn't get to that. I ended up having like a super busy weekend. Well, let me guess. We have an awesome announcement coming up. I don't know if you have an announcement, but you definitely have new work to show. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, there is some sneak peeks that I can give of some things that we're working on, and some technical discussions that we can have and talk about. It is It's pretty awesome. There's a quote by Andy Warhol that I heard. I'm going to paraphrase it terribly, but it's basically find something that is very boring and make that the most exciting thing. And I think that's what we've really been doing with all the legalities and consent and cookies and cookie banners. It is definitely a very, very interesting area where we've got so much exciting stuff that we're building out.
No, I love that. I love that quote. He said something about boredom.
I have it in one of my 20 notes. Let's see if I can find it. Because I've got it. You need to let the little things that would ordinarily bore you suddenly thrill you.
Yes.
There we go. That is
that makes a lot of sense. He would say that because he was doing things like taking like a Campbell's soup can and making it like a work of art. So he was trying to find like the artistic in the mundane, and you're trying to find the technically interesting and elegant in the most. I would argue the most mundane thing in all of software is cookie banners.
Oh, trust me, but we've hit some really, really interesting findings and stuff that we're on a really, really interesting path with. So I guess we get into it and talk about what we've seen recently, where we're at to in terms of our technology.
Actually, first, how did you pick the new name? I have a hunch.
What, C15t?
Yeah, so you should explain that
so
for people most people will know, but some won't. Yeah,
so it's Kuroflow previously, but then we decided that we wanted to split the name of the company and the hosting provider from the open source framework, because what we realized is whilst we're very much targeting the sale of cookie banners, a lot of the customers actually using it are not necessarily developers, whilst a lot of the innovation is done for developers. So this is where we went with C15T for the consent management framework, and then consent for the platform. So what does C15T mean? It means consent management.
The first and last letter, and then the number of letters in between.
Exactly.
Andreessen Horowitz A16Z.
Exactly. But the question is does it include the space or not in the numbers?
I would say no, but I don't know. Does Andreessen Horowitz include the space?
So I've totally forgot, but we went with the same Andrews Horowitz did. So if Andrews Horowitz did, we did. If they didn't, we didn't.
That's what I would have done.
Count it. I'm pretty sure it's with. It, because I was like C14 rings more of a bell than C16.
All right, I'm gonna have to count it real quick. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, Andreessen Horowitz does not count the space.
Okay, so I think consent management doesn't.
And then let's count yours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, so yours does not count the space either.
There you go. We went with the same as Andrews Horowitz. Call that a sign. I don't know.
Well, it's good because if you did use the space, then you'd both be 16. It would be C16T and A16Z, and that would be a little confusing.
Yeah, especially where we have a dependency called C12. So C15T has a dependency called C12 as well.
C15t.com is also a really good domain.
Yeah, it was actually one of the original names for the company, but we thought it was too technological. With obviously the numbers in as well. So we actually pivoted out. Actually, the first domain we tried to buy when we started moving away from Kuroflow was consent.management, but also ask someone to type consent.management into their browser and they would 90% get it wrong.
Yeah, management's a tough word.
So we went with C15T. And so much innovation has happened since we last spoke, and that sounds like me being a businessman. So much innovation, but genuinely, we've really been thinking a lot about bundling core web vitals, core web speeds, how much cookie banners actually affect performance. And there's a really nice analogy and story that I like to use when we think about consent banners.
Okay.
And it's around travel. And how many times have you packed your suitcase? You've packed your suitcase. You know the airport limit is 20 kilograms. Sorry, I don't know what it is in American, but European or the world, it's 20 kilograms normally. And your suitcase is under 20 kilograms. So you pack it up, you zip it up, and then you get to the airport and you put it on the scales, and then the airport goes, actually, it's 30 kilograms. And you go, what do you mean? It should be under 20. And then you open up your suitcase and you realize that your mom or your family have added loads and loads of things to that suitcase.
Because your child is hiding inside.
Yeah. And that analogy is how we look at bundling and what we think cookie banners and marketing scripts are doing to it. You build out your website and you look at that core bundle and you go, it's really lean. We know everything that's in it. And then the marketing department comes along and says, hey, we need Google Tag Manager. And they add 3 to 5 things, 3 to 5 JavaScript scripts that start tanking that web performance, making that core web vitals, page speed, everything way, way worse. But yeah.
Yeah, Fuzzy is saying you have no idea what it's like having an Indian mother. Half the suitcase is just other folks' shite.
Yes. That is the analogy that I came up with recently to start describing bundling, because bundling is one of these things that a lot of people tend to glance over. A lot of developers glance over it, and they only really start thinking about bundling when their website is performing badly, or it takes a long time to load, or images are the wrong size. Normally when they search Google Lighthouse scores. And we see, people normally do it in 2 places. They finish the website, they run Google Lighthouse scores, and it's like, performance is great. And then obviously they hand it over, then the marketing scripts get added, and that's when it all goes to rise. And we've actually been building out a tool to actually work out the bundling, strategies, and the good things, the bad things. I'll be happy to give you a quick demo of it.
Yeah, I just have a couple high-level questions before we get into the code. So what makes this different from just a traditional bundle analysis tool that we already have?
Why don't we just show you?
Okay, fine. Go for it.
Why don't we just show you? So let's
I like setting some stage.
Of course you do. So let's pull this up. So let's just pull up our consent management one. Actually, let's just start.
Fuzzy says you have balls of steel.
What? Why do I? I don't know.
Just because you're willing to just demo, just go straight into it, not
yeah. So look, there is some slightly risky things on here, like it is not finished and we're demoing localhost, but this is actually a really good tool that we've built out to also express why c15t is different and the differences that are involved with it. So
you bump your font up just one time.
Okay. There we go. So when we talk
your
about
UI is sick.
Yeah, thank you. This is just one of the things that we've built out that I love these things. But what we're looking at right now is just a basic Next.js website that's got nothing on except from a header, from a heading that says benchmark. And what we can see is that it renders in 20 milliseconds. The largest contentful pane is 20 milliseconds. And obviously there's no cookie banners or anything. And why is bundling so important is because we're speaking about a resource type that is normally not necessarily bundled into the website. So bundling is done in multiple ways, and JavaScript execution as a whole. we're quite used to bundling things with things like Webpack or TurboPack or ES Build. But then the other method of JavaScript execution is something called an IIFE script tag. And have you ever used one of these before? You probably have.
Invoked function execution is what it stands
Exactly.
for. Yeah, it's when you just
Exactly.
wrap it and then you have the parentheses afterwards.
Exactly. And a lot of cookie banners out there use that system for executing their JavaScript bundles. So is there anything wrong with that? Not necessarily.
Old school. It's kind of
very
old style JavaScript.
Yeah. And it has a network waterfall. It means it pulls in multiple resources that could be necessarily bundled into the direct bundle. It also means that you don't actually control that bundle. You can't control the caching of that bundle. Not necessarily open source, so something that you can even include into your bundle.
What he says is a million things wrong with it, which you just listed a bunch.
Yeah, so we wanted to really start building out a tool that first we could compare c15t with, but also then start comparing other solutions out there as well. So I'm actually just going to show this as this page shouldn't really have two things on. These tables should be merged, but don't worry. And these numbers are wrong. So let's just go to the home page where we view this. So the reason we built out this tool originally was to compare c15t Next.js with c15t React and their differences. So you might be saying, why? Like, what are the differences? Well, because we're now using things like bundled technologies, we can use things like server-side rendering, middleware, optimistic requests. And depending on the tool, say the c15t React does most things client-side rendered. For example, we can see here that the Next.js package has 0 network requests. Network overhead 0, because everything that it needs is bundled in, or a service or a React server component that decides whether it needs to show the cookie banner or not. But then comparing that to the React package, we can see that it does actually have a network overhead of 1 file. And we can see here, it's a show consent banner. As we're seeing, it's not 100% correct. Some of the numbers need slight tweaking, but we can see that this benchmarking tool is not heuristically just looking at that core web speed and how fast it loads. It's tracking all the network requests, seeing how different resources pulls other resources to really work out the network effect of these cookie banners. So this was the real first reason we built out this tool, to really say, hey, we hear a lot about this should be server-side rendered, or this should be client-side rendered, or are we doing that, or what about this? And our first thought was, well, how are we actually going to know it makes a difference? How are we going to know it makes a difference from converting our provider from being what's in the React package, where it sends off a network request to understand if it needs to show the banner, to a React server component that has that network request built into it? And this was that method where we can see that in the React package.
Can we stay on the bottom real quick? And I just want to ask a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
So,
the resource.
So all the way at the bottom. So like right here, what we're looking at, is this the same information you would get from looking at your network tab, just kind of in a nicer format?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
cool. Great. So what we see here is, you've got your different scripts, most of which are loading in like 20 to 30 milliseconds. Then you've got your show consent banner, which is taking about 400 milliseconds, about half a second. So that would kind of tip you off to saying, hey, here's this thing that's taking longer than everything else.
Correct. Yeah.
Great. So is there information that you're servicing that is not in the network tab?
Yeah. So we're actually putting together a scoring system where we're trying to look at things high level holistically as well, where we've got some performance statistics. So for example, these statistics here, the cookie banner impact, are actually the actual critical ones. For example, the React package shows the cookie banner in 128 milliseconds. Obviously, this is on a plain network, plain React app with no other content, and it renders that cookie banner within 128 milliseconds. That's really, really fast, considering from initial page load is 26 milliseconds to then showing the cookie banner 128 milliseconds.
Yeah, no, I really like how you combine it with the core web vitals, so you can kind of see them next to each other.
Exactly. And the other thing as well is that cookie banner is taking up 12.5% of the screen real estate, meaning it's probably not blocking. One that literally sits in front of everything, that's probably going to be like 80%. You can also see that the network impact is 0. Technically, it's not, because obviously there is a network request. I think this is more, the benchmark is currently looking at the core bundle, as in when you need to fire off the event, no resources are loaded. This is still a work in progress. This is super, I would say super early. We've been working on it for about 5 days.
No, it's legit. I mean, there's like a lot of information on the screen. It was a little overwhelming when you first pulled it up, but now that you've explained it, it seems pretty simple, actually.
And actually, we pass in things like the GitHub, so you can load up the GitHub, you can open up the NPM. And the reason for this was trying to take away the mythology of actually how much does it impact? How much can this help make developers have a more informed choice on how these critical pieces of our applications that are normally looked at like an afterthought is actually affecting performance? So I think, we can quickly look at a different provider.
I was actually just curious before we do that. Can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, because I'm always curious how websites can figure this out just by looking at the code. How does it know you're using PNPM?
So that's manual configuration. So
okay.
all the sidebar is like a manual configuration file where we manually set it, saying, this package uses PNPM, it has an ESM bundle, it has a CJS bundle.
So the user kind of enters that information themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's not necessarily, I don't think we're necessarily going to have the ability for you to search your own website and get like a report straight away. It's mainly you put the test suite into the repository, you run the CLI that's running that test suite, that then gives out a JSON structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then that JSON structure, when uploaded to the website, tells you the statistics. We could add the ability for you to benchmark your own websites in that, but maybe in like a second or third version. This is just V1,
Cool.
And what's actually really interesting as well is you can do things like disable first party. So you can see that the Next.js has 0 third-party resources that get loaded to show up the cookie banner.
Mm-hmm.
But if you was to compare that with the React one, you can see that actually there is a third-party resource. So it's really, really interesting. So this tool is going to be releasing hopefully in a few days, trying to demystify just performance for developers, because day after day I see my performance is bad. We're using all of these scripts are loading and they're not cached very well. They're not compressed well. They're not bundled in a certain format. And we can look at a competitor, and this is more open source. We want to not only look at competitors that provide full services like IOVendor, OneTrust, CookieBot, CookieKit. There's hundreds out there.
I don't know any of those are. Yeah,
but
need to necessarily go into them.
Yeah, but also smaller libraries like the cookie banners that don't necessarily have a backend or.
Oh yeah, I see now. It says unknown for package manager and bundlers.
Yeah, like and also like it's not open source; it's proprietary, but the performance is okay. But then you see the bundle; it uses quite a lot of heavy third party, and as you can see, if you wanted to filter, and this is where it's really interesting, is if you turn off the bundled resources, you're turning off basically everything that the Next.js would bundle. So we know that OneTrust, every time it loads a website, it's pretty much loading 711 kilobytes and 12 files.
Mm-hmm.
If that's okay for you, that's okay. But really what we're trying to do is just highlight it, saying, hey, a lot of these providers are using IFFE scripts. You then start wondering about performance and network impact and the critical, figures of how long does it actually take for a cookie banner to show, and really just try and inform people, with an area of performance that I don't think anyone has ever saw before. So this is, back to what Fuzzy said about like any announcements. This is one of them. Is CookieBench.
Oh, that's cool, man. So is this going to be a hosted thing? Like people can go to cookiebench.com or whatever?
Yeah. So we'll have it will all be on cookiebench.com, awesome. Where you'll be able to see all the benchmarks that we have ran.
Okay, yeah, you already have that domain. It's redirecting to consent.io right now.
Yes. It will be open source.
Can you see the comments on the bottom right on the screen?
No, I'm not looking at the comments right now. I need to swap my tabs in.
So I'm saying right now there's a new StreamYard feature I just turned it on where it shows comments on the stage. So on your screen share, it's on the bottom right. I don't know if you can see that.
No, I can. No, I can't see it on the screen share, but I see it when I swap back. Okay. So for all the, I will actually show some code for this, because
the comments are too small to read, so I'm just going to turn them off and go back to doing this.
I think it's quite fun to talk about this. But there are some things that we've chose with the bundling that are not always necessarily, you could say, the right choice, but they are a fair choice. For example, when we look at the benchmarks, like we said, every single benchmark runs on a Next.js website. It runs Next.js in TurboPack, so it builds to TurboPack and it runs TurboPack in web. It has the same Next, React, and React DOM versions. The first thing you could probably ask is why Next.js? And
I know why Next.js.
Why?
Because you're Chris.
Well, no, actually, there's 2 points to it that I think are really interesting. Is that market value? Next.js has a dominant on that market of developers. A lot of websites that are deployed in this current era are Next.js websites. So it's putting the benchmarks
to Fuzzy's dismay, I'm sure,
to using. Yeah. But the second thing is we wanted to have a full stack framework that we could also easily test things like middleware, things like cookie usage, because we have some really big ideas how we can push the performance of our Next.js package or any of these full stack kind of frameworks, logic forward But if we used just pure HTML file, we couldn't really show that, if that makes sense. So we went with what we knew of, obviously, Next.js. That does make them initial bundles bigger, like comparing it to the baseline. But it was that simple way that we can easily debug. For example, we can see that when we look at the page for the Next.js one, it's exactly the same. But this one pulls the consent manager provider from the Next.js package, when this one pulls it from the React package.
So aside from a React and Next package, do you have other ones so far, or just those?
So the core library, and we've not really spoken about this yet, but the core library of c15t is built in a way that is completely headless and composable to any framework. So when we look at packages, we have quite a few packages being built in right now. And let's just swap this to Canary.
You got a Node SDK. Is that like if you want to do it from the back end?
Yep. So if that's calling your c15t server from the back end, so say if you want to pull your consent into your dashboard, like we do with our dashboard, we use the Node SDK. We have a Next.js package. This is currently work in progress because we're really trying to work out the best performance that optimizes for server-side rendering. You know, a good question is, should a cookie banner be server-side rendered? Could it be server-side rendered?
I'm sure it could. Why couldn't it?
Because
I mean, if it can't, then what's the point of React server components if I can't even render a cookie banner?
Because it needs to be conditioned. You know, if you're in the US, you shouldn't see the cookie banner. If you're in the UK, you should. So, and server-side rendering it makes it basically static without JavaScript. So how are you going to work out location without that initial fetch call? It's a really interesting thing.
You have a different endpoint that's triggered by something in the front end.
But how do you know the location? This is a really interesting area.
From the front end, just because you could detect it on the front end and still render it on the server. Just conditional logic, couldn't you?
Well. It's an interesting question. We could talk about it more. But back to the whole point that we were just spoken about was the core library is pure TypeScript. So you could take c15t and build it into a Svelte website or a solid website with a custom cookie banner. Or you can use our React components, our Next.js components. Obviously, if someone came along and said, hey, I built out Svelte components that look exactly the same as the React components, we would love to have them built into the actual package. And like we would release a Svelte package or whatever. But it's just one of these things of maintainability and also things like mitosis. And we've spoke about this a hell of a lot. It's really, really hard overall, but we have some.
I've given up on all frameworks except React and Solid at this point.
Yeah, and we have some really cool things that we've been working on as well. For example, let me just close my tab because we can just speak it over. But when people think of a cookie banner, and this is also part of the cookie bench that we're building out, is what functionality is core and what is additional. For example, deciding if you should show a cookie banner or not. So geolocation support. How many providers out there actually have that? How many providers have that built in or additional extra? How many open source libraries that say, hey, here's a cookie banner, support that? And this is one of my favorite areas right now. It's like when I go onto Reddit or communities and people talk about cookie banners and they're like, oh yeah, just do this. And you're like, that's wrong. You're not hitting the standards that you need to hit, or because there's
Hold
so
on.
much.
You're telling me that people on tech websites are talking out of their ass about technical decisions?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily talking out their ass. I think it's truly understanding the needs of.
So it's just legit ignorance.
Yeah. And also, for example, oh, if I just put a cookie banner on the website, that's it done, right? Well, is it storing the consent in a remote location? No. Then no. You're better off just not having a cookie banner, because you're not hitting that standard. So this is that whole part of that cookie bench as well, is saying the heuristic side of it is the education around consent to say, hey, you don't know. So here's what you need to know to actually have a solution that is well built for developers. Legalities change, but doesn't mean the actual underlining code has to. And the other thing is performant. Name another area of programming or companies that say, hey, to load this, you need to run an IFFE script into your React app. Like, chat apps are pretty much the only one out there. That's probably the closest one that they have. And we've not even spoke about Google Tag Manager and that yet. So we have been doing incredible a lot, but I think we should give it a whiz. Have a demo of setting it up. What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah. So let's do it. So let me just create a demo. So let me just share my screen. So here we go. This is exciting. I think this is exciting anyway.
No, man, I love live code. That's what the stream is all about.
So
you have to bump your font up a lot.
Yeah. So, and also we're not going to stay here, but all we're going to do is we're going to do npm create React app. Even though we're in the wrong repository, it's fine for this demo. So yes, no, yes, no, done. Why is that so challenging? That is a good question.
Dude, this is why I like anytime I do an init create kind of thing, I always just figure out all the flags I need and I create one big command. By the way, we're getting some weird kind of background sound. It's not necessarily just the typing sound. It sounds like you're typing on your microphone. Like there's like this kind of sound.
Yeah, maybe it's my MacBook. Yeah, I'll try and type softly. Okay, so let's just pop up a new cursor tab and then let's just swap the screens to that one. So
you a cursor man now?
I've been for a little while. I don't really think about them too much, because they can take up a lot of people's minds of, oh, I use this one or I use that one. To me, I'm a man on a mission. I've got a lot of things to do and not a lot of time.
I agree. Yeah, bump your font up again. This is like I haven't even switched to an AI editor yet. I'm just like raw dogging ChatGPT right now.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. We've all seen Next.js websites before, so this is just it's always one of the things. So let me actually share my window, my whole window, so I can just make it easier. Present, stop screen, share whole screen. Okay. So here we are.
Okay, are you done switching screens?
Yeah. So I'm terrible at this. But when we load up this, it's just a standard Next.js website. Cool. So how fast can we get c15t on there? So adding a cookie banner to your website. So let's do it. We literally do npx c15t cfi canary. We just click enter, and then what that does is say, hey, are you okay installing this canary? We say, yeah, of course. So let's just give it a minute. We're on Greek internet here. Just give it one more minute. Let me just take a drink.
Oh.
What is happening? It shouldn't take this long.
No, it's just anytime you're streaming, usually things can take longer. Sometimes it gets caught up.
Oh, there.
I also find that for whatever reason, sometimes when I install dependencies in my editor, it takes longer than if I do it in like my Warp terminal. I don't really know what that's about, but I've noticed it before.
So here's the c15t CLI. So yeah, so basically now we're ready to start the onboarding. So for this example, we're going to host it on consent. So we're going to say yes. Do we need to create a consent account? No. And then it says, give me your c15t endpoint. So let's
I logged in real quick before we started the stream and I got an endpoint.
Oh, so you got an endpoint already. Great.
I do, yeah.
So if you send over the endpoint and then there's nothing here. Stop sharing my screen.
You want me to send it to you?
Yeah. It's not private. It's public information.
Give me 1 second to log back in.
But I can just log in as well.
Yeah, I don't know how do I find it in your dashboard now.
I just show all my email addresses to the world. So we'll just take for this purpose, we'll create a new instance with AJC web, AJC demo, and we'll say we'll host it in Europe because that's where I'm closest to.
In Ireland. Why Ireland?
Because that's where we can host the backend solution. So the database is hosted in Ireland, but it uses Cloudflare workers. So
for the database,
no, for the API. We can talk about that more in a minute.
Yeah,
but we can see that we now have an instance URL. So we take that instance URL and then we can post it in here, and then yes. It detected we're using Yarn. We're not using Yarn, but no.
Yarn. And then, I remember Yarn.
we trying to figure out the provider is pretty. It can be pretty mental. But what we have seen is that it's added the. It's also imported the code that you need automatically into the layout, and it would have auto installed the client. If you think, let's just install Next.js at Canary, and then it should be as simple as that when we then now load up the web page.
Is that a cursor thing where it has your PNPM lock underneath your package.json?
Oh, so that's you can set up file. It's a VS Code thing. It's just settings where you can set up.
I don't know how to do that. That's cool.
Hide things. So we can see here now when we open it, we have a cookie banner, and it's done. Literally consent. As soon as I click accept, we load this page. We shall see that we have one active consent record. It's that simple.
Simple.
Yeah. So this normally super complicated task, we think you could like speed run it in like 2 minutes if you knew what you was doing.
I mean, that was only a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was Googling around before this. I'm actually surprised that there is no like built-in Next.js cookie banner, like anything like that. I was kind of surprised to see that. It seems like they have all this other stuff built in, but they don't have a cookie banner. That's kind of surprising to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Have
because
you
it's
talked
also
to Guillermo about that?
I've had some really interesting question and answers and discussions with Sal. But one of the biggest questions, and I think one of the hardest things about it is when it comes down to the legalities, is you can provide your own custom cookie banner or cookie component, but is it legal? And do Vercel or any of these other parties want to take on that legal responsibility if it fails?
Oh, so you're taking on the legal responsibility, it sounds
Exactly.
like.
Because
Is
here's
that
the
why I
thing
had
about it.
to accept two different things to sign up? I had
Terms, conditions, and
to.
privacy policies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great component, and that is a secret second product that we don't have time to really discuss or talk about yet. But it is a very, very exciting area.
I don't know, man. You booked us for 3 hours. I think we got time.
We booked this for 3 hours. I feel like I've done all the demoing. I'm like, here we go. We're done. 45 minutes
Okay, we
in.
spend the next 2 hours talking about Redwood SDK if you want.
We are like, I don't want to sound like optimistic or anything, but it's like I've demoed how to install it without even looking at the docs. We have tons of docs that
Well,
we
yeah,
can go
because you're the
over.
founder. Of course, you can install without the docs. You built the thing. That's not that surprising.
Well, you could do that with the CLI.
It's true. It's true. It was pretty slick. I will admit. I'm just saying. It's always easy to do something when you're the one who built it.
And also, you know where to click and what to look at. And this is one of these really interesting things where trying to really focus on what is important and nail it down time after time, harder and deeper. For example, so many of the competitors out there have amazing products, but they don't focus on the developer experience. They don't focus on even explaining how to install it into React well. The amount of them that even have a Next.js package or a React package, is really low. And then the amount that are just stubs pulling all their other libraries are still massive. So much about what Consent is doing as a company is about education. It's about saying, hey, we believe this is a massive area of development that goes unspoke about. So many people speak about authentication for days upon days upon days, but consent is just as important. It's the legalities to your application, no matter where you are in the world. It's the, hey, you have the right to do this because you put in your terms and conditions, or you definitely can't do that because you didn't put in your terms and conditions. It's this area that we all just really skirt over. And
you should demo your dashboard because you didn't actually go into that.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So
Because I logged in and I checked out and I saw you already had a whole working thing and you could sync up your GitHub and all that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. So what's really important about the dashboard
you bump
is
up your font like 1 or 2 times.
Yeah. Also should I just
you just made it smaller.
Should I also make it dark mode just to
obviously
really not flashbang people? So looking at this, there's not much there right now. But we know that. But what we wanted to do is really just focus on the important things first. For example, organization support, instances. And we're going to get into that because this is a question that you said about the database, what's actually about, how it actually work. And we can talk about
I'd love
that.
to know more about the whole how you're hosting this and all that. I always find that interesting.
So, right now there's not actually much in there, but there's a version number. There's things like each c15t instance has an open API that you can call. So right back down to the principles of the founding of consent is saying, hey, we believe the technology is so diverse. You know, you could have a consent dashboard and use the c15t backend, but then completely manually create the front end aspect if you wanted to. You know, like there's nothing stopping you calling show consent and seeing, hey, I need to show GDPR because I'm in Greece, you know, without any front end code. If you wanted to, every single part of consent is composable. So should we speak over it? So what do we mean by everything is composable? And I think it's best to look at our documentation. This is obviously a work in progress, as there's so much to actually discuss, cover, explain. But we built c15t in a way that is fully composable from the front end to the back end. So if you wanted to host the database and the API layer yourself, you can do. Or if you just wanted to use c15t in the front end and give that consent to a totally different consent management platform, you can do that as well. We built it to be completely composable depending on the framework choice, your needs. But one of the biggest things was straight away saying, and when we look into the quick start,
I'm gonna just hop off screen for a quick second, but I'll still be listening. Keep going.
Yeah. So the quick start with Next.js is saying, hey, what are you actually going to need it for? And what are you going to be installing? For example, do you actually need the backend package, or do you actually don't? And we have worked on this to the point where what we think is important is that c15t, the front end framework, works in 3 methods. So it has the default hosted method. So that's where you're going to host a c15t instance yourself, so the database plus the API, or you're going to get started faster and easier with our cloud instances. You have the second mode, that's offline mode. So that's where you say, I don't need a backend, or I'm going to provide this consent to a different provider. So I don't need you to send off fetch requests to c15t because there is no c15t backend. And then the third one is a custom client. So this is saying, hey, we already use OneTrust and we're locked into a contract with OneTrust for 5 years or whatever, but we know that it's slowing down our Next.js application. So that's where they would use the custom client to say, hey, we want all the performance benefits of using c15t, but then we want to store the consent with OneTrust. So we've built it out to be really, really flexible.
Fuzzy gave you the fire emojis for that last part.
Yeah. And obviously,
what is OneTrust? Can you explain that real quick? I have no idea what OneTrust is. I'm assuming
so OneTrust is the biggest consent management solution out there that focuses on multiple areas. So not only do they focus on consent management, they focus on AI now and legalities of AI. And how I really like to discuss it is OneTrust is a legal platform built for lawyers, compared to consent, that's a legal platform built for developers. You know,
I like that. That's a good little pithy statement, because everyone hates lawyers. So anytime you can frame your thing as being against lawyers, you know, but
it's built directly for lawyers. The people, every time I've spoken to somebody who use OneTrust, they're like, yeah, the lawyer, you know, we said, hey, the performance is terrible. It's going to suck in all these methods. And they go, no, yeah, we know. But the lawyers have said we want to use OneTrust.
Yeah.
Because the lawyers...
it's like saying the vampire said we need to use this blood bank.
Yeah. You know, it's saying, but because there's not enough education in this is how bad it's going to affect performance. This is how bad it's going to affect page speeds. sure, the lawyers want this solution, but what about our customers? How much does it actually affect them?
What about the customers? Exactly.
So not only obviously is the front end composed, is not only is the back end and the front end is composable, you can have one without the other. We also have made the React components as composable as possible. So you can completely customize the styling on the styles. You can make it look something completely different. For example, when
your
I
stuff
load
always
up,
looks super great, Chris, by the way. Like everything looks really, really nice.
thank you, thank you. Like when I pull
Seriously.
up, yeah. When I pull up consent.io, you can see this cookie banner looks nothing like the default cookie banner. It looks directly like the website because we have customized the class names to allow that to have an effect. And the underlying system is super complicated. The theming system that has cascading class name management and style management and CSS variables. But the key to this all is we didn't want to say, hey, you need to bring Tailwind because what happens if your website doesn't use Tailwind? Or we want to use Tailwind, okay? You need to disable all the default styles. So we try to look at every single part of the consent journey and say, we was going to make the world's best developer platform here. How would we do that? And it's seriously focusing on every single aspect of performance, styling, management, deployment, and saying, how can we make an incredible developer platform? And I think there's still a lot of work to be done. We are not there yet, but I think this is all really, really exciting. What do you think?
I think it's great, man. I think you got so much stuff going on. You got a dashboard, you got an open source library, you got a GitHub repo, you got this benchmark tool. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff you got going on. I think the main thing is going to be having this all packaged together in like a holistic way where people realize all the stuff you're offering, because like some of it's on different domains, some of it's, it's a little bit spread out right now.
Yeah,
But everything you've got is incredible. And Fuzzy says the man is fucking cooking. I agree. This is absolutely amazing.
So there's a reason that things are spread out across multiple domains, and it's to try and look it's not trying to look, but it's trying to say, hey, what is open source? What is business? Need to make money. And what is education? And when we try to merge all of them into one brand identity, we felt like no one would trust the benchmarks because they're directly, tied to consent or C15T.
This was Ishan's thing about calling JavaScript Jam and not calling it Edgeo Talks or something, That was his exact idea. And I thought he was really right about that.
Exactly. And the whole point of Cookie Hub is to educate developers on the performance impacts of cookie banners. There's a really interesting reason why cookie is not in the name of C15T or consent management. Consent is because we believe consent is much. No, not necessarily that, but we believe consent is much bigger than just the cookie banner. And it's the long-term vision of what we're looking to build. When a lot of these platforms are like, yeah, when I need a cookie banner, I go to Cookie Pot or Cookie whatever, I'm sure I could say 20 words after cookie and there'll probably be a cookie banner system out there.
Well, let's hone in on that. What actually is involved in consent outside of cookie banners? Because I don't really know.
Yeah. So consent is everywhere. We just choose to wipe our brain of it straight away. For example, have you ever loaded a video game and the first thing it does is say, hey, you need to accept our EULA and user license agreement, or you go onto an airplane.
Terms and conditions. I mean, terms and conditions, not even gaming, just any app, every single app
or apps, websites, Zoom, events. Consent to say, hey, I consent for you to use my data is across the board, across the whole digital ecosystem, but it's not one of these things that we bring up. It's not one of these things that we think about. When you start a startup, you think, I need to put time to build my authentication out, but you don't think, oh yeah, I need to put time to build out the consent out, what are we allowed to do, what are we not allowed to do? Do you even know what you're allowed to do versus what you're not allowed to do? Do you even know what's legal versus not legal? And it's a joke that I keep thinking about in my head of like, oh, I'm on an aeroplane, 20,000 feet in the air, well, 45,000 feet in the air, and I need to sign a terms conditions, a cookie banner to buy the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like these things, there's so many people that say they're annoying, but there's a reason that they exist, and that is to say, hey, we want to give you the visibility of how your data is being processed and used. I think we live in a world where it would be really naive to say we don't need them. It's a very American view that's like, we don't need cookie banners. Okay, so the rhetorical question that I would ask to an American who said we don't need cookie banners is, would you rather all your data is used or not at all? You know, agree to all or agree to minimum.
I mean, they would like the information that needs the app to function to be used and not to sell you crap you don't want. That's what we want when we say things like that.
But then you say, okay, I want minimum. And then you go, why can't I reach support? You know, I can't contact support.
But that's what I mean about only giving the information you need to do the things you want to do. So that's what they want.
Yeah, but the thing is that lies in essential cookies, and it's an area of consent management where it's like, what is essential to the platform versus what is third party? Is a chat widget like Crisp or Zendesk, or there's tons out there, or Intercom, is that required? Is that essential, or is that additional? Analytics.
Have you seen the South Park episode, Human Centipede?
No. I don't really watch Center Park. At Center Park, South Park.
Yeah, it's a reference of the Human Centipede, which is an absolutely disgusting movie.
I think I watched it in my childhood youth. I really shouldn't have. But yeah, so overall, the biggest thing here is about education, is about exploring it and saying that all cookie banners are not the same size or style. Not necessarily. What I mean by that is, depending on what you want to do on your website, also means that you need a different type of cookie banner. For example, if you want to show Google Ads, you need a cookie banner that has been authorized by the European Union. Yeah, the International Agency Bureau.
That's where this stuff really gets squirrely, and why you're talking about Americans. The reason why Americans hate cookie banners because it's all based on bullshit laws written in other countries.
Sure. But it's one of these things where you say, is it bullshit, or are they saying that these solutions hit a minimum specification, sure, set out by a legal government, but it brings every single solution onto that level? So, for example, C15t does not have IAB TCF 2.2 authentication yet. It will be something that we get, but all of the biggest websites out there in the world where you go on and it says, hey, if you click accept, 250 businesses are going to have access to your data. That is because they're using the TCF standard, and a standard that Google, Facebook, all of these have built in to say, if we shown an ad, we know that we have the consent to do it. So you could say that, is this standard a good thing or a bad thing? Would you rather Google owns this standard or the European Union? It's a good question,
Yeah, I don't know if there even needs to be a standard. I would like it if just different apps use data the way they want to, and users can decide how they want. What I want is transparency. I want it to be clear, how is my data being used, so I can make an informed decision about whether to give it to this company or not.
What about, here's another one for you. What happens if you're in a country like Greece and you can't even read the cookie banner because it's in Greek, but your laptop's in English?
Well, that doesn't matter because all languages are easily translatable with the click of a button.
Well, you would think, but if the website is in like 90% English, but then the cookie banner is in Greek, your Google
and I copy
Translator is
paste it
not
and I
gonna,
put it in Google Translate. Like I just have to go into a different app. So
and the
here's
thing is,
this is a good thing Fuzzy's saying here. So he just says he denies it all anyway. So what's the issue with that, Chris?
in terms of the platform that I build out, I don't believe there's an issue with that. Germany has actually just passed a law saying that you have to have a reject all, deny all button as
great.
standard in cookie banners.
I'm behind that.
because there is certain things you can say of how much of it's heuristics, how much can you actually get away with. For example, there's providers for news in the UK and Europe that literally say you can't decline our cookie banners without paying a subscription. So if you pay a subscription,
so it's like a cookie wall paywall.
yeah, legit, 100%. And obviously, this law is to go against them kind of standards that have popped up to say, hey, what you're doing is unlawful, and you need to stop doing that. Because for myself, I believe that it's a gray area of consent management, and all businesses should follow the legal standards. If they choose to or not, that is up to them. But we really want to provide the best tools and the best default actions to do them things.
Daily Ranger in the Sun. Yeah, I know the Sun. I don't know the Daily Ranger. British
the
tabloid
Daily
rat.
I don't know the Daily Ranger. The Daily Mail.
I do know the Daily Mail. Yeah,
that happen all over, and this is a really interesting area that we're trying to make a lot better. So yeah, that's like consent management as a whole, and I know we booked 3 hours.
No, we don't need to go 3 hours. We can just go a little bit longer. I want to talk to you about some things non-related to this. So let's kind of, we can wrap this conversation up, and I just want to talk tech stuff with you for a bit.
Yeah, we can dig into how things are built. A lot of it is open source, but really it's like, what interests you? What kind of questions do you have? And we can talk them over.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Cloudflare. Are you hosting on Cloudflare? Are you hosting on Vercel? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I guess we in references to daily record as it's yes.
I have no idea what Fuzzy is saying here.
Basically,
gibberish to me.
Basically, certain regions in the UK boycott certain newspapers, like 100%, because of football things or accidents that they've covered up badly. Biases, you could say.
That's so funny. People boycott different papers in America if they support the wrong president. For you, it's more about football.
But this is an area that I don't try and dig my head a lot into, because I have stuff to ship, and we ship a lot. So the question about where we host things, I think, is a really, really interesting question. So we host our infrastructure, so our dashboard, on Vercel, and the API is also hosted on Vercel. And the database is a planet scale database. So the you could say the control plane is basically MySQL and Next.js. But then
why'd you pick planet scale? Just real quick.
That's a really interesting question. Because I don't know. I spent a lot of time with Postgres in my previous startup, and we use things like more raw level on like Google Cloud, and then there's a lot of serverless Postgres has popped up, but nothing felt really battle tested like PlanetScale. And then that, if you was going to pick one of these more high level abstraction providers,
yeah, so things like Neon would be, the Postgres equivalent, right?
Yeah. And then we kind of said to ourselves, do we even need Postgres? Like, Postgres gets so much of the talk and the hype and the whatever, but it was like, do we even need Postgres in this? And it was like, actually, we probably don't. And we felt like PlanetScale was a better database in that discussion. It wasn't a long discussion. It was probably like a half an hour discussion, to be fair. It's like, let's go with PlanetScale, because we actually converted from Postgres Neon to PlanetScale because we saw a lot of the issues that Neon was going through with performance, and then they get acquired. But that's the discussion for another day. But then, to carry on, so the control surface
Neon was acquired?
Yeah, by Databricks.
That makes
the
a lot
control
of sense.
surface is MySQL. But then the really interesting question comes up when we say, because we've built this self-hostable technology, you can host it in Postgres, MySQL, or SQLite. So you can run a c15t instance in any of them three languages.
Is that because you're using Prisma or no?
Well, it's because, yes, you can also use Prisma or Drizzle or Keasley. So when you have a package that can work with all of them, you then question, how should you host the official host of it? Which one should we pick internally? Postgres, MySQL, SQLite.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you built the library in a way into where it's agnostic to all of these things, and then when you host the canonical instance, you have to make a decision.
Exactly. So which one do you pick? It's a good question. We picked SQLite. So every single c15t instance, yes. Okay. And we also have some instances on Cloudflare D2, D1, whatever it's called. Team Landscape reminds me of CNCF Landscape, but yeah, the main reason we picked, so there's actually some really interesting decisions why we picked SQLite, was version controlling. We thought it was better to version c15t as a whole on the same symver number. So when we introduced breaking changes to, say, the backend package, you would also reflect that into the front end package. But then you have this hosted solution. They go, but say you update the backend to have a breaking change. Now you need to write an API that version controls it to say, hey, if they're on version 1, use this API. If they're on version 2, use this API. And this is where we thought, big brain geniuses that we are, why don't we just let each instance be isolated? So it has its own database and its own API.
Database per user, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So each c15t instance.
I was planning on doing that for Auto Show for a while, actually.
But it's really complicated because...
Exactly, yeah.
It's really easy and it's really complicated. Version controlling gets a lot interesting. But at the same time, you could say it was a really interesting choice because it wasn't our first choice. Our first choice was to build almost c15t to have extra hooks that would add client IDs, organization IDs to the tables. So it will be in this general database, say on Postgres or MySQL. But then we thought we were diverting from the c15t specification that we were building out by building all this custom logic to host it. So what we really try to do is to keep the logic, the hosting, as close to the open source version. So it's very dog fooded. It's basically saying, if we need functionality for our database, we're not writing custom logic for the wrapper around c15t that we call consent. We're just going to write that logic directly into the c15t instance. So when we think about like the dashboard, that's just using the c15t REST API, the Node SDK, and trying to keep that like methodology and that thought process has been really interesting. One of these areas that will it scale? We don't know. To a certain extent, we have already had some customers scale much, much bigger than the rest of the customers, and everything is fine, you know? So
you mentioned a while ago the Cloudflare. So where does Cloudflare fit into this stack?
So Cloudflare runs c15t instances. So when you deploy a c15t instance, you're deploying a database plus a Cloudflare worker. So every single c15t instance is its own Cloudflare worker.
Okay, so that's why you're saying you're hosting your dashboard on Vercel, but the users, they're working off of that dashboard, but then they're launching their own instances on Cloudflare.
Exactly, because Vercel's deployment structure is not necessarily set up for just instances. Like we could, there is a way to do it, but I think there's bigger questions as well. Like, would it be better to run our own Kubernetes clusters? We will
Absolutely
see.
Not.
You know, but
Fuzzy
where
can
we
help you
are
out
in
with
scale,
that.
where we are in our scale journey, what is there is working, and it's simple.
Yeah, so it sounds like at this point there's no Docker containers anywhere in this mix.
Nope. We have an open issue on GitHub for Docker, a Docker container.
I've heard Cloudflare is going to run Docker containers soon.
I wouldn't be surprised, but also I wouldn't say like, not that we don't need them. They're built for a very certain developer. And we think most developers are just going to say, hey, log on to consent, spin up an instance, copy and paste the variable into their into their app, and done. If you want to go run Docker, run databases for consent, be our guest. But we think majority of the audience is going to host it. So yeah,
totally.
But awesome, yeah, man. Like I love talking about this, but I also can't believe how fast we've covered like so much breadth of tools. Pretty incredible, I think, what we've built out in such a short time. You know, this is only month 4 of the company, technically. And 2 people. It's kind of crazy. It is kind of bonkers.
Last thing I want to talk to you about, I'm sure you probably have not been paying much attention to it or know much about it, but what are your thoughts on the new Redwood SDK?
Actually, I have been spending a lot of thoughts on it, and I actually do have a demo of it. I've used it. I've tested it.
Oh yeah, cool.
And I also use a lot of Cloudflare right now with obviously
consent. That's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you.
Cloudflare documentation can be very shaky at times.
It's almost like there's too much. it's a rare situation.
Not enough.
They have so much docs across their whole platform,
so and then much areas.
A very specific thing. You're like, how do I find this one thing? Yeah, Cloudflare.
Or like, for example, how do I add multiple environmental variables to an instance? You know, the API is not necessarily clear, or they need to use a CLI, or, you know, there's a lot of things I like about Cloudflare workers. The one thing that I don't particularly like is the deployment strategy, the manual like deployment system where it's like if I'm going to throw shade on like Redwood in any way, it's not necessarily Redwood. It's just run this command and it pushes it up. But I quite like the Git flow strategy.
Yeah.
Where it's like you've deployed production, now it deploys it up. And I think there's a lot of room there for a tool or a hosting provider, because that's what we're basically doing. We're manually, instead of using the Cloudflare CLI, we're manually deploying instances in the cloud and adding the bundle to it. That is a mental thing. to describe, but to describe it to you, the C15T instances are bundled to Cloudflare workers, but they're not deployed. And then that bundle gets bundled into our Next.js application. And then the Next.js application sends that to Cloudflare workers saying, here's the bundle, deploy this. It's kind of a bit mental, but there's not necessarily a better way right now. And it works. That is the core thing, is that it works. And if I could say anything about Cloudflare, the deployment strategies are not necessarily the funnest, but I know they're doing a lot of area in that. But the question of Redwood SDK, I think it's really, really cool. And I think there's a lot of questions around the use case, how things are done, how they should be done, where they should be done. It's a very server-side rendered strategy compared to something like the Create React app. Well, TanStack Start. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where it goes. And have already played around with it myself, seen a demo in person. Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I was chatting with Peter about trying to get him on stream to do some stuff. I need to reconnect with him. Yeah, I'm thinking about diving back in. I haven't been on the Redwood train it's been like almost 2 years now since I've used Redwood. And yeah, I think it's cool that they...
Were you Astro? You're an Astro fan now, aren't you?
I'm using... Yeah, I mean, Astro is what I built my blog on. And then it just kind of, spun out from there. I don't know. I did a lot of... I was using Solid for a bit, some Solid Start, and I was digging that. Now I'm using Astro with Solid, so I get a little bit of the best of both worlds. And I spent a long time just building Node. Honestly, like a lot of he's an astronaut. I spent like most of Auto Show I just built as like a Node CLI with no front end whatsoever, and that was like totally different for me. But that was really great.
Yeah.
I messed around with Fastify for a bit. I had like a Fastify backend that Astro was calling out to, and then I eventually got rid of that and built all the Fastify endpoints into Astro API endpoints. So yeah, I mean, I've done all sorts of crap now. I felt it was good to get away from Redwood just to build up my skill set and really learn how to do things from like the ground up. And now I'm like, do I want to go back to like this all-in-one built-in framework kind of thing? Because Astro does a lot, but it definitely doesn't do as much as Redwood would,
And I think the core to all of this, and I hate to be like a business person when I say this, is where are the users? And it's like one of these really interesting questions where
they're not on Redwood. That's part of the issue.
It's like we see a lot of discussion about Next.js and is Next.js really that good or blah, 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 blah. But where are a lot of the deployments actually produced right now? It's Next.js. Why does Netlify push, try to get feature comparity with Next.js? It's because everybody's deploying Next.js. Why are people, Cloudflare workers, doing the same? Because Next.js is the current zeitgeist. It's the current thing, and Gatsby was before that, and it's kind of why we are focusing.
But isn't that right there the argument not to use Next because they might be the next Gatsby?
Well, yes and no. You could say you can still use Gatsby today. If you have a website using it,
if you have a death wish,
fine. But there's good questions around that, and there's good questions around all frameworks. Like, as we saw Redwood start to wind down, Redwood GraphQL, is that a bad thing? Yes, no. Blitz, Bison, changes are forever. And when we started building out Consent, I said, I want to go as low down as possible. Hardly any abstractions. And I actually walked that back to Next.js because I was like, we just know so much more about Next.js. If it errors, everyone knows so much more about it erroring. And I think all tools have their pros and cons. But for me as a business person, not just a technologist, you have to follow where the market is, and the market is very much in the Next.js corner right now, if we like it or not.
Yeah, that's if you're building dev tools, though. If you're just building an app that's just a user is going to use, I feel like that's less important.
Well, what about a team? Finding good, solid developers.
No issue.
Yeah, finding good, solid
I got
developers.
ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini as my team.
Yeah,
They
and
know
all of
every
them at the same
framework.
time. Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's really interesting, and it's kind of like why we built out the Next.js package and the React package is because fundamentally React is client-side rendered, but also where it's going is server-side rendering. Redwood SDK is pure server-side rendering. How does the bundle actually make a difference? It's kind of a massive thing, and we're yet to fully see. I don't know. It's a really interesting question. To be fair, we haven't spoke a lot about CLIs. We quickly brushed over the consent CLI.
Yeah, what do you use for the CLI?
Oh, we basically use a lot of custom tooling.
So you're not using Commander? Dude, Commander's where it's at.
We're using Clack. But then, I don't know, should I actually show you? Should we actually look through the CLI? I feel like
I'd love to. That's the one thing I've gone the most deep in. Is I spent like a year just building a CLI with Commander.
I love it. You spent a year building a CLI, and our CLI is like not a side note to me, but it's just one of the things I've spent a lot of time on.
Well, it's interesting because I used the CLI a lot for auto show. Like that is how I've been kind of building out all the functionality, but I knew it was never really sustainable in the sense that I needed to build a front end that people could use who are not developers. So I spent too much time building out the CLI, honestly. And apparently Fuzzy likes Clack.
Yeah, I don't know if I like Clack, I'll be honest with you, but I'll show you. So we use rslib to build it. That's already the first controversial point, is all of c15t is bundled with rslib. And then how we actually build it out is we have a context system plus a command system.
Oh, so they more built Clack.
Yeah, so let's just look through this. So for example, we basically pass in the arguments, we then build a context, and then that context adds basically how logging messaging gets done. So for example, you see here, we have logger.debug and then logger.message, and logger.message will put something in the CLI. Logger.debug would as well under a different flag. Same with things like telemetry. One of the really important things is we wanted to know how the CLI was being used, not to be creepy, but to be like, oh, are they actually deploying Next.js applications, or are they trying to deploy it with Svelte applications? So we created a core context. So the real key to our context system, our CLI system, is this file called not that one.
Your font up one.
Yeah, it's actually under utils. It's called logger. This is my favorite file ever.
Are you using chalk?
No. Yeah. Because we're using something called double tie logger.
That's fine. This is exactly how I set my logging up too, with this like the interface with the args and all that.
Yeah, so we used a custom logger. So I built a logger called double tie. We won't start talking about what double tie is because it's a long subject.
You built your own logger. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but the reason why was so we could basically wrap things really, really easily. So everything gets logged to a level of like logger.failed will fail it plus exit, logger.success will write a success message. Logger.note will put a border around it. Logger.message will just log a message. But this was a way that we could really control how the CLI looks and acts in a unified method, to be like, actually, what happens if the logging system, instead of using console.log, everything was just this like custom logger, is how it really started. And yeah, we built our own logger called double tie logger. That logger also gets used in our backend, as well as some other double tie packages. We have they're not in here yet, but we have some other double tie packages that we've not pulled out yet. That is a good question as well. Is what is double tie?
Oh, I was just going to ask that.
So double tie, doubletie.com. I own many domains for many projects. So double tie is a SDK toolkit that we're trying to build out slowly but internally. So really, a lot of the logic that runs C15t.
Is this why you're able to have like 3 different query builders?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and also
that makes a lot more sense now.
And also, this is basically an ORM as well. I basically built out an ORM as well. We won't talk about that. But yeah, so the whole point of double tie is to try and take a lot of that core functionality that we don't believe is consent management, but it's how we can build a backend and abstract it to a point that anybody can use them toolings, if that makes sense. So you could technically take the C15t backend, take out all the consent management stuff, and then you'd have double tie. And then you could build it up into a different area. That's the whole premise of double tie, doubletie.com. But really it's a slow progress. So for example, when we go to backend, you see that there's this folder called double tie, that all of these. So there's API router, data model, database adapter, migrations, results, types, utils. All of these are going to be double tie plugins, packages. I've just not pulled them out of the C15t backend yet. But yeah, it's how we can do things like our schema. So our schemas are built in this like unified way that like when we look at the registry, it pulls it from these packages. So we have like a double tie error, then an error system and a type system and a model system. It's pretty complicated.
As he said, this is beyond impressive. He thinks it's super cool.
Yeah. And I was showing the wrong tab, but we can see here, like when we look at backend, and we go to SRC, here packages, these are all these internal double tie packages that we've just not abstracted out yet into like a unified SDK system. But there's like a database migration package. There's a API router package. There's a database adapter package. So this is like how we said, how do you support
Prisma drizzle,
yeah. How do you support passing in multiple
This makes so much more
adapters?
sense. So I was like, why are you supporting 3 ORMs? That's so crazy. And now I see, because you already built a library that does it.
It's not official yet. It's not official. And the reason it's not officially released is because I kind of just want to put it out there and be like, this is some crazy code. Like, you can use this, but also if you start like saying like, this is broken, like, don't ask me to fix it. I don't know. I just kind of was like the genius that wrote it and then lost
use at your own risk. Yeah.
Yeah, because so much stuff gets pushed in and almost wrong, where it's like, how could we do this? Well, you know, if this is an open source tool, we're not just going to say, oh, you have to use MySQL. We're going to say, oh, you could use Postgres and SQLite. But once I use Prisma, that's okay. We support all of them. Just declare technical bankruptcy and just support everything. Yeah. It's open source, not paid. Yeah. But it's one of them things where one of the most interesting things about putting things out there is supporting it. I don't really want to put stuff out there if we're not actively going to be using it or supporting it. And that's why some of the packages have sat in the back end longer than others. For example, like the logger, we're pretty confident on. Sure, there's Pinot, there's 20 other loggers out there, but this is one we've built specifically for ourselves. I think really that should be Double Tie's like package system is. This is built for C15T. We've just abstracted it out. If you want to use it, use at your own risk.
So are you worried about the maintenance burden?
Oh, yeah. The maintenance burden on consent already is massive. You say, I really appreciate everything when you say like, hey, this is impressive. Holy hell. And we're like, yeah, this is like 2 people. Like this is the maintenance burden on like everything is kind of crazy. Like if I got hit by a bus tomorrow,
this code's gone forever.
Well, it's not that the code's gone forever. It's that trying to pass it all into an AI context window to even think about it, it's pretty big at this point.
Yeah, you'd have to break it down into pieces.
Yeah. But this is all like interesting things where so much of Everfund was built closed sourced, and you could say not necessarily the best, as in like written the best, because it very much had a lot of transformation throughout the whole product, from pure JavaScript to TypeScript to structure types, and that evolution cost a lot of time. So we started on the strictest principles of like a really strict biome config and a really strict TypeScript config, and then say we want to work on tools that only allow us to like hit that level of quality and high level maintainability. And yeah, sometimes it's easier to build a tool yourself than to use another tool. I won't always suggest that.
Well, it is now. I think that's because of AI to a huge extent. The velocity at which you can ship code now has completely transformed. So it makes more sense now to build your own stuff, even if it does have a higher maintenance burden, because you can ship it.
Is it good code? That is the question.
No such thing as code. Good code is a fucking lie. There's no such thing as good code. There's code that works and code that doesn't. I hate this term good code.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know, it's been kind of crazy.
Does it work exactly?
Does it work? Yeah. Or does it mold well to other scenarios? And does it have to? And this is why telemetry is a massive part for us as well, to guide things like CLI.
But do they give consent to telemetry?
Yes. It's when the CLI runs, it says we are tracking telemetry. You can disable this by passing -- no telemetry. We're very clear that we're tracking telemetry. But to be fair, telemetry isn't tracked through the consent system. Maybe we're missing out a point.
Oh. Well, you know what Ronsel is?
I don't know what Ronsel is, to be fair.
Apparently, that's one of Fuzzy's metrics. Is it like Ronsel? I asked him, "What's Ronsel?"
What's Ronsel?
Fuzzy always introduces me to new things. He's hip to all sorts of things I don't know about. That's why I like him.
Ronsel
does what it says on the tin.
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. There's a lot of technology out there.
Okay, so this is not a tech thing. It's Ronseal, Ronseal. Originated back in 1994, the popular phrase does exactly what it says on the tin. It was developed when Ronseal employed London-based advertising agency HACL to create a campaign that, without trying too hard, would demystify their products. That's cool. I have heard does what it says on the tin. I never knew the origin of that phrase. Thanks for the history lesson, Fuzzy. That's
So, I guess the question more than anything is, do you feel since speaking to you, you understand consent more and becoming more educated on it?
I feel like I'm a lot more educated on your tool specifically. I feel like the question of consent is almost philosophical question, but
Yeah.
I think you were talking about the education thing. I know that no means no. When it comes to the education thing, I think if you had more stuff around, like information around how to deal with different jurisdictions, because I know your tool is meant to do that, and I don't know how much of that is. You're smiling so clearly. I just hit on a big point, but
you could go to consent.io/regulations.
Okay. Oh, okay. No, there we go. No, you should have shown this off. Can you pull this up on your screen real quick?
Yeah. Of course. You could go to regulations and see
this is
law.
fantastic. This is exactly what I meant.
And then it breaks.
And then it breaks. Yeah.
The reason why is because the middleware, it's kind of crazy.
That's why you didn't demo it, because it's not quite working yet.
No. But basically, how we've not spoke about this.
Oh, I can finally deploy to Saudi Arabia. Awesome.
This is really cool. But basically, regulations is its own Next.js application. Consent.io, the www, is its own Next.js application, and /dashboard is its own Next.js application. So how do you put all three on the same domain?
Redirects.
Middleware. It is bonkers. Yeah. And the reason regulations doesn't quite work is because of that. But we do have the last thing that we can talk about.
Sure. Yeah, I'm getting hungry, so let's wrap it up the next 5-10 minutes.
Let's just pull it up. So this is a little bit old, but I think it's a little bit fun. So this is a prototype that we were building out, where you could ask it things like, tell me about CCPA. And what it would do is it would give you the legal documents about CCPA. So not just Google searches, but it actually look at the raw legal agreements for it.
I was actually thinking about this and how you could use AI on your thing. And I was thinking about, how it would be able to summarize all this legalese.
Yeah. So for example, we could pull the consent, so the privacy policy for consent.io, and ask it, how good is this privacy policy?
Hella good, obviously.
Wow, that's a good question. And obviously, this AI is trained on the legal documentation.
So did you fine tune a model to do this?
Interesting. But this has been sitting on the shelf for it says Caroflow.
Yeah, they say this is on the old branding, yeah.
But this is something that we actually want to build into our dashboard, where it's like not a lawyer, but it can, for example, it said here, the privacy policy is well structured and covers key areas that global data protection laws typically require. It is clear, fair, and comprehensively and written in accessible language. And it has a high confidence on this. Does that mean it is better than a lawyer? I won't ask that question.
Certainly cheaper than a lawyer.
Yep. So that is a fun little thing that I think we're probably going to build it into our dashboard soon and have it under like a flag that's like contact us. And also, please, and we're gonna make you sign like an agreement that says this is not lawyers, this is not advice. Treat everything it says as, you know, copying your competitor's privacy policy and changing the name.
Yeah.
So I hope this was a really fun stream. Yeah, I don't know. Any feedback? I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I'll just reiterate kind of what I said before is that just make sure there's ways for people to discover all the things that are here, either like one sort of homepage that links out to everything, or just when you need one thing, make sure it's linked to in another place.
Yeah,
so it's like you built a ton of stuff here, and it can be hard to get a sense of everything that there is. But I think everything you built is super cool. You got a lot of interesting stuff. You got a lot of wide ranging stuff that covers a bunch of different kind of aspects of it. I think most people, if they heard you're just building something for like a cookie banner, they would have no idea of the scope of what you're actually doing. So yeah, I think it's sweet, dude. It's very, very cool. I would love to book another stream in like a month or two and build in the cookie banner to auto show.
Yeah, well, it will only take 5 minutes, hopefully.
Allegedly, we'll see.
Well,
I'm on an Astro app. We're using Solid.
Well, I think it. We might have to build in a custom cookie banner then.
Exactly.
But we can do that. We can definitely give that a demo. And work it through. Yeah, it's super. I'm super really excited to continue sharing this area with the world, and momentum's only growing.
Yeah, you gonna hit the podcast circuit soon?
I don't know. We need to work out if we've got our tools in a place that we're confident enough.
Yeah.
We have.
Maybe I could get you on, JavaScript Jabber, stuff like that. I got the connect, so.
We definitely have, I think, most of the core functionality. We're building out a new marketing website for c15t. But I think some refinement needs to happen on the wording first, because I think one of the biggest things, if you go to like consent or you go to c15t, you'll be like, so what the hell is it? It doesn't directly say that it's a cookie banner solution.
Yeah, it's very consent management redefined.
Yeah. And you'd be like, what the hell is consent management? So there's a lot of education to do in that area. And we have so much to do. As you see, we've built so much, but it's also like we built the car, but we also need to build the road because no one knows how to drive the car,
Yeah.
So like it's kind of complicated, but we hope that Cookie Bench will be a massive like opening factor to be like, unbiasedly making metrics available for different consent solutions out there, so people will know that I use the solution and they don't do these things that I thought it did, or they do or not, or and like we said, consent c15t doesn't tick all the boxes. There's more boxes that it doesn't tick right now than it does tick, and that's what the benchmarking tool's for, to say, hey, this is our roadmap, we're going to hit all these things as well. So yeah, super happy to have been on, and can't wait to chat anymore to anyone. And my email address is christopher@consent.io. Please reach out to me and be happy to speak.
Yeah, your two main domains are c15t.com and consent.io, right?
Yes.
Cool. So check those out.
We'll see how long it will be until we own consent.com.
Consent.com. That must be an expensive domain. Oh, wait, it says it's for sale. $500,000. Jesus Christ. Wow. Good luck with that one.
Good luck, exactly.
Half your funding round.
Look, there's a point to argue if this is actually going to be $1 billion company. How much is consent.com worth?
It's true. Yeah,
it is a good question. Well, we shall leave it there.
Cool, man. This is super fun. We'll schedule another one. And Fuzzy, thanks for being here as always. For anyone else out there watching, hope you check this out. And yeah, hit up Chris if you want to learn more. And with that, we will call it.